I remember standing in my garage early one Saturday morning, surrounded by the small signs of a project that had slowly taken over the space. There was sawdust still sitting along the edge of the workbench. The smell of cut was mixed with the faint scent of old tools and metal parts. A notebook filled with sketches was open beside a few components I had collected over time. I had spent hours researching, comparing ideas, and trying to understand how different systems worked. But the frustrating part came when I looked at everything in front of me and realized something simple. I had plenty of information, but I still didn't feel like I understood the bigger picture. And that feeling is something many homeowners experience when they start looking for better ways to manage energy, reduce dependence, or simply understand what options exist. The problem is not always a lack of effort. Sometimes the problem is that we have been looking at energy through a very narrow lens for a very long time. And what if the biggest thing holding people back is not the technology itself, but the missing knowledge that helps people understand it? Most people who become interested in alternative energy begin with the same basic concerns. They notice rising electricity costs. They notice how dependent their homes are on traditional systems. They start asking whether there's another way to approach energy. And naturally, they begin searching for answers. Some people look into solar systems. Others explore backup power options. Some become interested in the history of electricity itself and the ideas developed by inventors like Nikola Tesla. But many people eventually run into the same obstacle: confusion. They find pieces of information everywhere, but those pieces rarely come together into a clear path. One article explains one concept. Another video introduces another idea. A diagram shows a design, but does not explain the reason behind it. And after hours of research, many people end up in the same place they started, still interested, still curious, but unsure what to do next. This is what I call the missing knowledge problem. It is not that people do not care. It is not that they are incapable of learning. The problem is that many people have never been given a structured way to understand the subject. And when information feels complicated, people naturally assume the problem is their ability. They think, maybe this is too technical for me. Maybe I need years of experience. Maybe this is something only professionals can understand. But that assumption creates a cycle. People stay dependent on systems they do not fully understand because they never received a clear explanation of how those systems work. The interesting thing is that this same challenge has existed for a long time. Throughout history, many inventors and researchers explored ways of understanding electricity, magnetism, and energy differently. Nikola Tesla became known for challenging conventional thinking about electricity during the late 1800s. His work represented something larger than a single invention. It represented curiosity, the idea that understanding fundamental principles could open new possibilities. And that same curiosity is what brings many people today back to studying alternative energy concepts. Not because there is one simple answer, but because learning changes the way you approach the problem. Consider the homeowner who receives their electricity bill every month. At first, the increase may not seem significant. A little more this month, a little more next month. But over time, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. The house has not changed dramatically. The family has not completely changed their habits. Yet, the feeling remains that energy costs are becoming something they have less control over. So they start making small adjustments. They turn off lights more often. They become more careful with appliances. They search for ways to improve efficiency. But eventually, many people reach the same internal conclusion. Maybe there is nothing else I can do. And that is where frustration begins. Because the real issue is not only the cost. It is a feeling of being disconnected from something that affects everyday life. Energy powers almost everything around us. But many people never learn how the systems behind it actually work. They simply receive the result. The second scenario is the person who starts researching alternatives. They hear about different energy approaches and become interested. They begin looking into equipment, designs, and possible solutions. At first, the idea feels empowering. Finally, there may be another direction, but then they encounter the complexity. There are technical terms they do not understand. There are systems that appear expensive. There are approaches that require knowledge they have not developed yet. And slowly, curiosity turns into hesitation. The person starts thinking, Maybe this is not realistic for someone like me. Maybe I should leave this to experts. What surprised me most is how often people confuse a lack of explanation with a lack of ability. Sometimes people are not struggling because they cannot learn. They are struggling because nobody organized the information in a way that makes sense. The third scenario is the person who enjoys building things. The person who spends weekends fixing, creating, and experimenting. Maybe they have a garage full of tools. Maybe they enjoy understanding how objects work. They are naturally curious. But when they explore energy projects, they encounter another challenge. They find incomplete information. They find instructions without context. They find concepts without a clear starting point. And eventually, even someone who enjoys learning can become overwhelmed. The thought becomes, maybe I am missing something. Maybe I do not have enough experience. Maybe this is more complicated than I expected. The fourth scenario is someone who simply wants more independence, not necessarily because they want to completely change their lifestyle, not because they want to become an expert. They simply want to understand their options better. They want to make smarter decisions. They want to know what is possible. But without a clear foundation, every choice feels uncertain. They continue searching. They continue watching videos. They continue collecting information. But they never move from curiosity into understanding. And this is where most people get stuck. They believe the problem is their motivation, their intelligence, their technical background. But that is not the real issue. And here's what all these situations have in common. The homeowner frustrated by increasing costs. The person overwhelmed by complicated alternatives. The builder who cannot find a clear path. The person looking for more control. All of them are facing the same barrier. The missing connection between information and understanding. The problem was never the person. The problem was the approach. After understanding this pattern, the question became different. Instead of asking, why do so many people struggle to find better energy solutions? The better question became, what would happen if people had a clearer way to learn the principles behind energy systems? Because before someone can make informed decisions, they need understanding. That is where the idea behind the energy revolution system becomes relevant. The approach is not based on simply giving someone a collection of random information. It is based on organizing concepts, diagrams, explanations, and resources into a structured learning path, a roadmap, a way for someone with curiosity to understand the foundation before attempting to build or explore anything further. And this changes the way people approach the subject. For the person frustrated by electricity costs, the first step is not immediately searching for a complicated solution. The first step is understanding what options exist and how different energy concepts work. For the person who looked into traditional alternatives and felt overwhelmed, the difference is having information organized in a way that feels approachable. Instead of seeing a mountain of disconnected technical details, they can begin understanding the individual pieces. And for the DIY builder, the biggest advantage is having a clearer framework. Because building anything starts with understanding. A person does not become confident by simply collecting more information. Confidence comes when information begins to make sense. This is why structured learning matters. It transforms scattered curiosity into a process. The concept behind this approach is simple. Give people the knowledge, resources, and guidance needed to better understand energy principles and explore projects with a clearer perspective. The system includes educational materials, diagrams, and step-by-step resources designed to help people follow a more organized path. Not everyone will have the same goals. Some people are interested because they want to understand energy better. Some are interested because they enjoy DIY projects. Others are simply looking for more awareness about possible alternatives. But the common factor is the same. They want clarity. They want to replace uncertainty with understanding. And that starts with having the right information presented in the right order. Now, there are several questions that naturally come up. The first one is, I am not technical enough. Would something like this even make sense for me? That is a reasonable question. Many people assume they need years of electrical experience before they can understand energy concepts. But learning does not begin with expertise. It begins with curiosity. Every person who understands a complex subject today started by not understanding it. The difference is usually not intelligence. It is having explanations that make the subject easier to follow. Another common thought is, I do not have a professional workshop. And that is another understandable concern. Many people imagine that exploring energy concepts requires a specialized environment filled with advanced equipment. But the first step is knowledge, understanding the concepts, learning how the pieces connect, developing a foundation. The third objection is, I have tried researching this before, and I ended up more confused than when I started. This is actually one of the biggest challenges. Information alone is not always helpful. Too much disconnected information can create more confusion. That is why organization matters. A clear structure allows people to understand one concept before moving to the next. Another question people ask is this going to be too complicated? The answer depends on the expectation. The goal is not to transform someone into a professional engineer overnight. The goal is to provide a clearer understanding of the principles and resources involved. Complex subjects become easier when they are broken down into understandable parts. And finally, would this really make sense for someone like me? That might be the most important question, because many people assume new technology and energy concepts are only for certain types of people. But curiosity is not limited to engineers. It belongs to homeowners, builders, learners, people who simply want to understand more about the systems around them. The biggest shift happens when someone stops thinking, I am not qualified to understand this, and starts thinking, I can learn this if I have the right path. One of the most interesting things about learning energy concepts is that the transformation is often not just about the project itself. It is about the way people begin thinking. A homeowner who once looked at an electricity bill and only saw a number can begin seeing the larger system behind it. A person who once felt overwhelmed by technical information can begin recognizing patterns and understanding concepts. A DIY enthusiast who once felt stuck can begin approaching projects with more confidence. The change begins with understanding. Imagine someone who has always enjoyed working with their hands. They may not have formal technical training. They may simply enjoy learning and building. With organized resources and clear explanations, they can begin exploring ideas without feeling lost in the beginning. Another person may start from a completely different place. They may not be interested in building anything immediately. They may simply want to become more informed about energy and understand what possibilities exist. Different motivations, same foundation, knowledge. This is why the most important part of any energy exploration is not just the equipment or the materials. It is understanding the principles behind the system. Because when people understand the reasoning behind something, they can make better decisions. They can evaluate information more carefully. They can separate curiosity from confusion. And they can approach new ideas with a clearer perspective. The goal is not to create unrealistic expectations. Every home is different. Every person has different goals. Every project has different requirements. But the ability to understand creates something valuable. Control over your own decisions. That is the real shift, moving from simply accepting information to actually understanding it. Now imagine 6 months from today. The electricity bill arrives again. The same questions remain. The same uncertainty remains. You may still be searching for answers, still watching videos, still collecting pieces of information without knowing how they connect. Not because you were unwilling to learn, not because you did not care, simply because you never had a clear starting point. That is the quiet cost of staying in the same place. Not just the money, not just the time, but the continued feeling that something important exists just outside your understanding. Now imagine a different scenario. Not a perfect scenario. Not a situation where every problem disappears overnight, but a situation where you finally have a structured way to learn, a place to begin, a clearer understanding of the concepts, a better foundation for making decisions. The hardest part was never your effort. The hardest part was not having the right information organized in the right way. Sometimes the first step is not finding the perfect answer. Sometimes the first step is simply understanding the questions better. For many people, the search for better energy solutions begins with frustration, a high bill, a confusing system, a desire to understand something that affects everyday life. But those frustrations are not signs that someone failed. They are often signs that someone is looking for a better understanding. The ideas explored by inventors like Nikola Tesla remind us of something important. Progress often begins with curiosity, with asking better questions, with learning how things work, and with being willing to explore possibilities that are not immediately obvious. If you want to see the resource I mentioned and explore the structure materials available for learning about these concepts, I left it in the description. If this topic helped you look at energy differently, consider subscribing. Share your thoughts in the comments and letting me know what part of energy technology you would like to understand better. Because the more we understand the systems around us, the better decisions we can make about the future.